Hi, welcome back. It is sad that today is the last dance. I am honored to have this group of TOEFL dedicated test preppers. You guys have been wonderful over the last 6 days. Today is day 6 of our 6-day intensive. And everything today is just going to be overview, recap, discussion. What can we do? The final last pieces and elements to get the score we want on the TOEFL. The score we want and the score we deserve, right? So we are mastering the TOEFL exam. We are still mastering the TOEFL exam. Every night this week, we've been mastering it. And this is our last session. So tonight, we're going to do a test recap. Recap means you go over everything that you've talked about, but in a short summary. So it will be a short summary of the other presentations. So if you missed one of the presentations this week, tonight we will do a short recap. It's not enough to learn everything, but it's enough to get the most important pieces for the entire test. And then we're going to talk about at the end time management and how to best manage time in each of the sections, since that is going to be something that could really impact your score. If you're starting recording your speaking section too late, you're going to lose out on a lot of points. All right, this is me. Hello, I'm an English teacher. I've been living in Algeria for 5 years. I'm Ariella. Nice to have you with me tonight. And as you can see, these are the 6 sessions in the course, and the last one is tonight. So we started with an overview of the TOEFL. We went through reading, listening, speaking, writing, and tonight we're doing recap and time management. It's always interesting for me when I start a program. It feels very intimidating. Oh my gosh, we have so much material to go over. The TOEFL is a complex test. It can feel heavy for the people taking it. For me, when I do test prep courses like this, I feel like, how can I make this seem digestible, like something you could actually improve or work on and not just sort of die in an overwhelmed state. So I have that sense of, when we started, I had that sense of, oh my gosh, this is going to be like 6 days of TOEFL. It'll be so heavy. But actually going through it, it's been, for me at least as the teacher, really nice to see the engagement from everyone in the chat, getting to know you all, seeing you get to know each other, and understanding that the TOEFL, just like any other test, is something that you can study, learn about, and ultimately improve your score on. It's not Mount Everest, that it's going to take you years and years to get what you need out of it, or you'll have to train for years and years. It is something that when the time is right, when you need that score for university or for work, that with a few strategies and with enough time on your hands, that you can really work to get the score you deserve. All right, that's my pep talk. Today we'll be going over a recap of the test, and we'll be going over the registration procedures. So you'll have to bear with me. Some of the slides are quite boring, but I wanted to give you a visual of what the website will look like when you're signing up. Then we're doing the famous TOEFL versus IELTS. Okay, this is the big question, and we're going to go over the 4 things you should consider when you are deciding whether to go for TOEFL and IELTS. I won't tell you what they are yet, but around minute 45, we should get there. Then we have time management tips for TOEFL success. I see in the comments you guys are saying you can't believe it's the last class. Time flies. It's true. I mean, 6 days is already very short in terms of a class, but it is definitely going to be sad to not see you every evening. And Hisham asking if the training for the TOEFL at American Institute is with me personally. No, Hisham, I actually don't teach anymore at the Institute, except for these big online classes that we do with the embassy. There's just not enough time in the day. The only program I actually personally lead right now is our TESOL, which is probably part of the reason that I kept confusing TOEFL and TESOL. If you remember the first class or the second class, I kept saying the wrong one. This is teacher certification. So I train English teachers right now, but it's rare that you'll find me actually in an English class. But never say never. So who knows? I love teaching. I love having opportunities to teach. All right. TOEFL recap. You may be rolling your eyes. You may say, Ariella, we've gone over all of this. I know it all. But what I bet is that you have forgotten some details, or it will be nice to see all the information from this week gathered into one place. So let's run through it. The TOEFL is a standardized English test. Okay, this is where I said, don't roll your eyes, bear with me. I know you know this. It can be used for studying abroad in English, getting an English speaking job in Algeria, getting a job abroad in English, and getting a visa. These are the four main circumstances that you'll find yourself in when you consider taking the TOEFL test. Here are the sections. We have the reading. Reading is 2 reading passages with 20 multiple choice questions. Now, these are total. So if you do the math, you can see that it's 10 questions per reading. But I didn't break it down because this is the recap. We have the listening section. The listening has 5 excerpts that you will listen to with 28 multiple choice questions. So if you were here for the listening night, you know that there's different types of exercises. Some of them are lectures with 1 speaker. Some of them are conversations with more than 1 speaker. And there's not always the same number of questions, okay? But the general overview is you have 5 excerpts. Overall, you have 28 multiple choice questions. This is important. These sections are only multiple choice. Next, we have speaking. So the speaking section, you will have 4 prompts. A prompt is I don't know, maybe I'll ask my crew here. What's a prompt? You have 4 prompts in the speaking. What's a prompt? Okay, Nora says the scenario question. A prompt can be a scenario, true. Anybody else? So prompt dialogue system. Well, I'm glad I asked actually, because it seems like maybe we need more clarification on the word prompt. So prompt is just the sentence, sometimes 2 sentences, that tells you what to say next. So when we prompt someone to speak, we give them instructions. So we're saying, okay, in 5 minutes, I want you to come to the front of the class and answer the question on the board. The question on the board is the prompt, the question you're answering, okay? It's the prompt, but sometimes it's not a question. So I can say to you, hey, Zineb, explain to me why Tunisia is a good tourist destination, period. That's a prompt. It's the instructions for you to speak. Okay, we can use prompt for speaking and we can use prompt for writing. Why? Because both of these are production, language production. So you could say that reading and listening, you are receiving language. That's reception. I'm receiving language through reading. I'm receiving language through listening. When I'm producing language, it's in response to something. And that something, whether it's a question or a statement, is a prompt. Okay? So if you're feeling like prompt is maybe still not clear, just replace it in your mind with the word question. In the speaking section, there are 4 questions. The reason we don't say questions is sometimes it's not a question. When someone says, explain to me X, that's not a question, but it still provokes an answer. All right? So 4 prompts that provoke or prompt, because prompt is also the verb, for speaking responses. So you are responsible for submitting 4 speaking responses recorded into the computer. Then we have the writing section, which has 2 prompts. Okay, and if you were with us yesterday, you'll remember those prompts. We have one, which is the online academic discussion. So that's considered a prompt. All of the instructions and all of the content there. After you've read everything, then you respond with a written response. And the other prompt is a combination of a reading passage and a listening excerpt, and with instructions. So after listening, after reading, you then submit a written response. So this is the most basic overview that you can see when people say, what are the different sections of TOEFL? Reading, 2 passages, 20 questions. Listening, 5, not passages, right? Because you're listening. So 5 excerpts, 28 questions. Speaking, 4 prompts or 4 questions and 4 responses. Writing, 2 prompts and 2 written responses. This is the timing. You are going, oh, these are not in the order they should be in. I'm only noticing it now. Reading section should be first. Reading section, 35 minutes. Listening section should be second. It's totally in the wrong order. 36 minutes. Speaking section is third, 16 minutes. And writing section is last, 29 minutes. Salah, what is the meaning of an excerpt? You're asking me. Good question. So right here, when we say listening has listening excerpts, an excerpt is a part of a conversation. It's not a complete conversation, or it's a part of a lecture. When we just take a part of something and we don't take the whole lecture, we call it an excerpt. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with time. It can be a 30-second excerpt. It can be a 2-minute excerpt. What's important is it's not the whole audio. It's just a part of the audio. Great. So your total time for the TOEFL is going to be just under 2 hours, 154 minutes long. However, a question that I didn't get from anybody, and I was wondering if we'd get it, which is breaks. So we have 1 hour and 54 minutes in terms of the time that you are producing like your answers, that you're answering your questions or you're typing or you're speaking. If you're adding up the time, you're going to get to 1 hour 54. But are you allowed to take breaks in the testing center? Well, so there's two options, right? The answer is essentially yes, you should be able to take breaks. However, it will actually depend on the center where you're taking your TOEFL or if you're taking it at home. So if you're taking it at home, I believe you can request a break between the sections. Okay, this has been something that I couldn't find a clear answer on with the new test. So I'm sorry I don't come to you with a perfect information on this, but I believe that what you can do in the testing centers, you're allowed to imitate at home. So in the testing centers, you get 10 minutes break between each section, which is why you can bring snacks and drinks, because you'll actually have pauses between the sections. And there's a 30-minute break that you can use between two sections of your choice. So you can choose either to take a longer break between listening and reading, or a longer break between, listening and reading, and then we have listening and speaking, or between speaking and writing. I see Umama asking, I'm in France. Is it possible to pass the TOEFL in France? Yes. In fact, you'll find way more centers in France than you will in Algeria. I won't ruin my next slide, but I do have some good news about that, actually. And Hajar, I'm also wishing Sarah good luck. I wonder if she's probably not taking it this late, but she probably already took it earlier today. I hope she had a good time. Well, I guess when you do a test, you don't have a good time, but I hope she did well and felt confident. All right, registration procedures. So, why do I just have a red circle? Okay, well, this is what I'm looking for. So when you are signing up for the TOEFL test, you do not need to go to the website of the testing center. You actually register at the same website, whether you're in France or whether you're in Algeria. So if you look at what I have in the screen in front of you, I've kept on purpose, I kept the URL at the top. So you can see that I'm at ets.org. You don't need to memorize that entire URL of /TOEFL/test-takers/IBT. I mean, feel free. If that's how you want to, how you feel most comfortable, you can put this in. But what did I do? I simply Googled how to register for the TOEFL. And it's the first thing that comes up. This is an international standardized exam. It's not something that is buried on page 10 of Google search results. All you have to do is Google registration TOEFL. And it should be the first, or one of the first, if not the first options to come up. If you're not sure, if you're clicking on the right option, just make sure that it is with the company ETS and that the URL begins with ets.org, okay? This is what the page looks like. So I went onto Google, I asked about how to register, and it instantly brought me to this page, all right? This is actually also on this page, or in this section of the website is where you're going to find practice sets in this square over here where it says prepare for the test. This is a gold mine of resources. And it's also actually where you sign up for the test itself. It's all in one place. So you'll note that we have the TOEFL IBT test. We've been talking about IBT, which is that it means internet-based test. And in Algeria, the only option is the IBT test. And so that's the one you want to make sure you sign up for. So we are going to click schedule your test. This is what happens when you click schedule your test. You're going to get directed to a screen that gives you instructions of what to do. So it recommends that you pick a test date 2 to 3 months prior to, and it says an admissions deadline. So again, what we keep coming back to with TOEFL is that the test is really designed for exchange students or foreign students. So non-native English speakers who are taking the test in order to study at a university in English. So they are every time listing recommendations for you with this assumption that you're going to university. So you keep that in mind. If you see something about an admissions deadline and you say, no, actually, this is for a business visa that they want proof of English, or this is for a job in Algeria that they want proof of English. So you can ignore these recommendations that are just about universities. So yes, the first recommendation says pick a test date at least 2 to 3 months before your earliest admissions deadline to ensure your scores will be reported in time. I don't want you to be nervous about that first line suggesting that you need 3 months to get your scores, because in reality, it takes 2 weeks. Scores take 2 weeks to come to you, and they come to you via email. I want you to notice the second box, which I've actually zoomed in on. So at-home testing requirements, if you can look at the bottom of the screen with me, I was just hoping on the next slide I had isolated it, but I'm not sure, maybe it didn't get saved. So if you are choosing to take the IBT test in your house, this is the page that tells you what requirements you need. So when I was telling you earlier about you need to have certain, your computer needs to meet certain operating requirements in order for your TOEFL test to get accepted. And it's to the point where they'll allow you to start the test, and then halfway through or 3/4 through, if they detect that you don't meet the requirements, they will stop your TOEFL immediately, they will nullify your score, and they won't refund you. So this is what I want you to pay attention to if you're considering taking it at home. The good news is that if you do pass the equipment and environment requirements, environment meaning you can be in a quiet space, that you have enough connectivity that the camera can watch you while you take the test, because they will be filming you while you take it to make sure that there isn't any, there aren't books near you, you don't have another laptop that you're typing on, etc. If you are able to meet those requirements, I really do recommend the home testing version. You can do it at any time of day. They only have 4 days a week open, but you can really choose the time slot that works for you. You can be comfortable in your home. You can take it in pajamas if you want to. I mean, of course, on top in front of the camera, wear something normal, something regular, but pajama bottoms, comfy socks, it's something you can really take advantage of. I see a few questions. Salah saying, do you need to schedule the test so you'll be able to prepare for it with their materials? Good question, Salah. So actually, no, you don't need to sign up for their test before you have access to the preparation materials. And as evidence of that, I've been using their preparation materials all week, and I'm not registered for the test. So all the prep materials are available for free for everyone. I mean, I think what you'll notice is that you only have so many practice sets. So maybe there's only 2 or 3. And then if you want to keep doing practice sets, you might have to find another resource. You might have to find another website. So they don't have 10 different practice tests or sample questions, but they do have a few really good examples of each section, and it will get you started, and it's totally free. Do we get the certificate in PDF format via email? So what you're going to get in the email are going to be a score. It's known as a score report. It is actually not a certificate, but that's a really good question if you can request a certificate with it. You know, that's a really good question, Sela, actually. So we're going to go to scoring in the next section, and you'll see what the score report looks like. And that is what you submit to prove what your score is. But does it also come with a certificate? Yeah, I don't think so. But I will look that up. I will look that up and see what I can find. I don't believe it comes with a certificate because this is not a pass or a fail test. So a certificate usually indicates I've passed something. I succeeded at TOEFL, but you cannot fail TOEFL. You get a number. Either you got a 67 or an 85 or a 112. So, but it is true that it's possible that they make a more formalized PDF version for you to download. Most likely, you're not going to get an email with an attachment, but you will get a link to where you can download your scores. You can also, if you are using TOEFL to apply to universities abroad, you can actually put their information in your TOEFL registration. So on your online account, you can say, I'm applying to the, I don't know, University of London, and then I'm also applying to something in Barcelona, and then I'm also applying to the school in Canada. And every university has a code on the TOEFL website, so you can find the universities, and they will automatically send your scores via email to the universities for you, so you don't have to do anything. You take the test, and your scores automatically go to them. This is really ideal for someone who's already been accepted at a university and the university gives them an offer of something called conditional admission. So they say, hey, you seem great. You're in. We accept you at the university on the condition that you can prove that you have a high enough level of English. So you just need to get higher than a 90 on the TOEFL. And so what you would do is when you do your registration for TOEFL, you put that university in your sheet of universities to get your scores, and that makes sure they get them as fast as possible. You have to be careful because, excuse me, if you don't want them to get your scores, or if you don't like your scores, you want to retake it, well, you just sent it to them. So then you might not want to take the automatic option. But for things like conditional admission, usually the bar is not so high. They have already told you they want you. You can comfortably put them into the system, let them get your scores. So Hisham is saying when you are doing, when you are taking the test, can you use ChatGPT? So I want you to understand that when you take an at-home standardized test, they are fully taking over your computer. It will lock your access to anything except for the test. If they don't want you to be able to use like the option or the shift key, maybe Control C is copy, Control V is paste. It's possible that when the standardized test is running, even these keyboard shortcuts might not work. So you certainly won't be able to access the internet. No way. You certainly won't be able to access ChatGPT. It's the reason they film you is to make sure you're not using a different device, because the only way you'd be able to get on ChatGPT is if you had a laptop sitting next to you that you would go to, and either they'd see the laptop on the camera because they film you while they take it, or they see you leave. They'd see you leave in the middle of the testing when it's not a break period. So all of these would be reasons for disqualification. Okay. Yes, I wouldn't suggest that you consider the home-based test easier for cheating. And I've actually heard them be stricter with home-based tests, that if you get up at the wrong time, cancellation of the score. So really don't assume that just because you're doing it in your house, you'll have some kind of leniency. I think it's exactly the opposite. So you can see we are here at ets.org. We are signing up. We have clicked schedule your test. Oops. Okay. So now this is what we just saw on the PowerPoint presentation, some information about reporting your scores to universities, when they recommend versus admissions deadlines. Then we have the at-home testing requirements. In fact, while I have you here, we could even just load these and look at these together right now. So, equipment and environment requirements for at-home testing. If you're planning to take the TOEFL IBT Home Edition, that's what they call it when you take it on your computer at your house, Home Edition. Review and confirm that you meet these requirements before registering. If you don't meet these requirements on test day, you won't be able to test. In that event, you won't receive a refund or a free reschedule. They're very, very serious about this. You will not be able to reschedule. And here, I'm just going to do a scan to show you all the requirements, all the different requirements. We have confirming your computer meets equipment requirements and running equipment requests, but then we actually have requirements for the computer. The Proctor Communication Browser download. This is the name of the browser, or it's not even really it's not a free open browser like Chrome or Safari, but this is the TOEFL custom browser that's going to lock your computer into only doing the test. So you have to download it in advance. Checking your speaker, your microphone, your camera, and then some tips to prevent issues. Then we come to the environment and the testing space. So as I talked about, we need to see that you have privacy. We have even things here on clothing and appearance. So if you click on one, it will give you everything. Your ears and face need to remain visible throughout the test, not covered by a hat, hair, or other items. Okay? Dress appropriately for the test. Religious headwear is permitted if your ears remain visible. It's just, very detail oriented. You'll need to remove headphones, smartwatches, face masks, jewelry. Okay? Note-taking materials. Wow, actually, look at this. For security purposes, you may not take notes on paper. Interesting. This is one of their more recent updates. I didn't know this. No note-taking if you are doing it at home. So you can use one small desktop whiteboard with an erasable marker, or one sheet of paper inside a transparent sheet protector. Wow, okay. So if you're doing it at home, you're going to have to do it on a little mini whiteboard. It is starting to sound like maybe taking it at the testing center is a little bit less stressful. At the end of the test, you'll need to show the proctor that your notes have been erased. A proctor is someone who watches you while you take the test to make sure that essentially that you're not cheating and you don't have any issues. All right. So it's no joke when you are figuring out if you want to do the at-home testing. I'm not going to go into all the requirements for the technology. I trust that if you're considering doing at-home testing, I've shown you where to find this resource and find this page, and you'll be able to source that out for yourself. So now we're going to go back to the first step. When you are selecting your test, the first thing you need to select is if you want the at-home version or the version in a center. So you'll notice that the version that's in a language learning center doesn't have any special name. It's just called TOEFL IBT. And the one that is at your house is called TOEFL IBT Home Edition. Okay, so that's where that language comes back to us once again about home edition for the tests. So we're going to choose, let's say, not home edition. Great. Easy. This registration process is very fluid and intuitive. And I want to emphasize for a second time that the first step to sign up for the TOEFL is to come to this general website. It is not to contact the center that offers the test. This is the only way that you can officially register for the TOEFL exam. So search by city. We're choosing the area and the date. So we're going to search by an area, and then we'll pick dates that are convenient for us. So let's start with Algiers. And let's say we want to take this May to June. Okay, maybe June to July. Let's say let's do a June to July test. So it's going to generate for me a calendar. And anything with a blue circle, an exterior blue circle, means it's available. And if I click the circle, it will turn dark, and that will be the selected date. So let's say June 1st. All right, I have one option at the testing center, Intuition, which we've talked about a few times as the center in Algiers where you can take the test. If I clicked this little plus sign in the corner, it's now going to give me the available times. So I can see that it's 10 a.m. on Saturday. And I'm noticing when I look at the calendar, actually, I'm noticing a pattern. It appears that the test is always available on Saturday. Let me check the 15th. What time? At 10 a.m. So just even if you're not sure that you want to take the TOEFL or you don't know when you'll take the TOEFL, going through the registration process early is a nice way to understand availability. So I can see that every other week on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m., I can take the test in Algiers. Now, here I have something that I was excited to share with you because especially Noor, who's been coming to class, you've been telling me, hey, Ariella, it's actually not just Algiers that has TOEFL anymore, it's also Sétif. Well, I discovered 4 cities in Algeria that offer in-person TOEFL testing. So we're going to start with Oran. Let's say we want to be in Oran and we still want June to July. We have 2 available dates. We have Friday the 7th or Friday the 21st. So I'm going to click Friday the 7th. And you can see that there is a language center in Oran that offers the TOEFL exam, Sibawa Language Institute. I'm not familiar with them, but I'm happy to hear they're offering it. We'll click our little plus sign and we can see the testing time is at 9:30. We'll do another one on the 21st, testing time at 9:30. So very cool. What do I deduce from this? I deduce that in Oran, every other Friday morning is an option to take the TOEFL test in person. All right, we're gonna go again. I said there were 4 cities I found. So let's look at what Noor was telling me, which is that you can take it in Sétif. We'll do June and July. Although I remember it looking slightly different. I'm just going to look at May for a second. So you can see I can toggle. Even though I had selected June and July, I can use these arrows to look at the calendar in other months. Yes, this is what I remember, a Wednesday and a Sunday. That's why I want to look at this one. So we have Wednesday, May 1st. We have something, and it's not in Sétif. It's actually in Constantine. So we have a center called the Universal Learning Center, who I am familiar with. It's a wonderful language school. We click plus, and we can see that at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, you can take the test in Constantine. Now let me click on the 25th. I'm curious, is it still the Universal Language Center? No, this is the school that Noor was telling me about. So once a month, in May, at least it's once a month, you can take the test at MBI in Sétif. I'm going to click a plus here, and it's at 10 a.m. Okay, so these are the 4 places that I found. Let's sign up for this one. Why not? I'm going to click here to confirm, and then I'm going to click here again to confirm. And this is going to give me a summary of what I have selected. I have selected the TOEFL IBT. I have selected to take it at the Management Business International Institute in Sétif on Saturday, May 25th. And the next button I'm going to click is register for your test, as it nicely and slowly loads. Great. So it's leading me now to a system where I'm going to create an account. You are going to create an account. So you'll notice that you have a sign in, username, password. If you go down, you're going to find something called new users. So in order to officially schedule the test with ETS, you need an account. And this is the step when you make that account. Okay, as soon as you have selected your date and selected your time, it's time to go and create a new account. All right, we're not going to go all the way into starting the account together. This is the last step before I'll go back to my PowerPoint and move on. But I want to highlight that you must input the name of that you have on your ID is the same name that you put in this account. It needs to match, very officially match. No nicknames, no dropping your second name or dropping your first name or anything of the sorts. What is on your ID needs to match what you do for the account. So they're going to ask for your first name, last name, middle name only if you have one. It's not required. Gender, date of birth, username, password, confirm password. So you're creating a full account, and then your address. Okay. As well as phone, email address, and then some basic information about what is your native language, country of citizenship, and country of birth, in case those are different. All right. Let us go back to our main presentation. Something I wanted to point out to you, as excited as I am that there are, which I am very excited that there's more than one center that you can take the TOEFL exam. It doesn't, you need to ask the testing centers how much they're going to charge. So every testing center essentially gets to decide how much they want to charge for the test at their place. And that could really influence your decision. If it's substantially cheaper at one center as opposed to the other, maybe you do the extra commute, the extra drive. Maybe you find an excuse to go away for a weekend. My instinct is telling me that the pricing will probably be similar because the testing centers don't want to lose out business to each other. The price will probably be around the regular 63, 62,000. But it's a really good idea to call them and ask what are all the fees that you would have to pay if you took the TOEFL at their center. All right, let me see what is happening in the chat because I definitely ignored it while I was on the registration website. I think it's strange to pass the exam at home. I also think it is a little bit strange to pass the exam at home, but I think I would still prefer it instead of going to a center. It's very strict. Visible ears. Nor is rolling her eyes. I know. Visible ears. Okay. ISEM says, I think IELTS is much better. Maybe it's less strict in this regard. Are we allowed to breathe? All right, and then otherwise it looks like folks are just happy to see that there's other testing centers. I'm sorry for the misinformation. In fact, I was thrilled to discover that there are more centers offering TOEFL. If someone ever tells you, oh, hey, ISEM, hey, Hasna, did you know that there's a new testing center in town for TOEFL? What you do to verify if that's true is you go to this exact website. If they are an authorized testing center, the only way that they have access to the test is if they're authorized. These companies have a lock-in key on their tests. There's no sort of unauthorized or fake version out there. And before you ever give money for the test to a testing center, you make sure that you have signed yourself up on the ETS website. I know centers will say, oh, we'll sign you up, we'll take care of it for you. Okay, I don't think it's that complicated to do it on your own. And I personally would feel reassured to have seen my options, understood what the different centers, what their timings were, what their days were, called them for prices. It shouldn't take that much time, and you still remain in the driver's seat of booking your own test. Okay, ISEM, what is the payment method and how much does it cost to put in mind? Yes, we're going to come to cost. It's on the next page, next section, I think. IELTS is definitely cheaper than TOEFL. So I see Ramesa asking me where I teach English. So actually, I founded and run an English school in Algiers called the American Institute. But what I was just explaining to all of you, my lovely students, is that I no longer teach. I started the school as the teacher of everything. It was my business, my students, and it's now been 4 years already. And now I'm doing the general administration and management of the school, as well as helping lead some cool projects like our teacher certification program, which Noor, thank you for your comment. I saw you mentioned that. And our cultural center that we're opening with the US Embassy, and then these online free classes. So you'll see me, I'm around, but when you come to American Institute, I won't be your teacher. You might be with one of our other amazing teachers, though. It also includes some other Americans who are on site. So you're more than welcome to come. We're based in the Placette of Hydra in Algiers, or we have online classes if you're not in Algiers. Hadra's saying that you stalked us on Instagram. Great. Stalk away. We have a lot of social media content out there about the Institute, and I've done some videos as well. So happy to have you I was going to say as our followers. I don't know if you're following, but would love to have you as a follower, but happy to have you checking out our stuff. All right, let's go back to registration. So these were my slides that just somehow did not make it through. So next slide, just ISEM what you were looking for, which is the cost. So we talked about the cost in the first section, but this is our recap. And so we're going back to all the main points. The cost of the TOEFL online is $240. So I want to be clear, you can pay this price and still take the test in an in-person environment. All this means is that you made the payment online. So you can pay $240 and take the test in person in Sétif. in a center that if you were paying at the center, you'd pay in dinar. However, in order to pay $240 online, you need to have access to a credit card to pay that amount in devise, or a bank card from a devise account. Okay. The in-person, the prices, again, I really want to encourage you to contact the centers themselves to see what their pricing is exactly. There may be some variation, but 63,000 is the most recent price that I heard here for the Intuition Center in Hydra. Yes, it is extremely expensive. Standardized tests are an investment. This is something that I know we have an expression in English when you say something on repeat again and again and again, and it's called to beat a dead horse. Like, you don't have to keep beating the horse. It's already dead. I know that's gruesome. It's actually a really sad idiom, but it just means that you're repeating and repeating. So I know I'm beating a dead horse when I keep saying this, but TOEFL is not something that you should go into unprepared, because you will waste money and you will be very disappointed with the result. It is not just preparing to work on your English mistakes. It is actually studying for the exact test, learning the top strategies, familiarizing yourself with the sections. Make your investment go as far as possible. You also want to keep in mind about the amount of time the score is valid. The score is only valid for 2 years. So don't take the test until the moment when you need it. Because if you take it early, you say, oh, I'm going to apply to university next year, so I'll take it now. No, wait until you have a university admissions letter. Because what if life gets in the way and you delay, and so you don't apply that year, and then when you find out 18 months later that you're admitted, and then you took the TOEFL but you want to retake it, it gets messy. So don't take the TOEFL until you actually have the reason for the TOEFL within 3 to 6 months range. Okay, I see some very funny M&M jokes happening in the chat. I appreciate it. So this is my great news slide, which is basically about in-person testing centers, Constantino, Oran, Sétif, and Algiers, which we just talked about. And maybe we'll even see more coming as well. I'm really happy to see that they're finally bringing more testing centers. Day of procedures. So this is what happens the actual day of the test. And now we're kind of assuming that you're going to that in-person center, okay? So first of all, you want to validate what documents you need with you. Usually for TOEFL, it's not a huge quantity of documents. It's just your ID card. But your ID card needs to match requirements. And you'll see when you sign up on the website, there's a link that you can check the requirements. Like, it has to have your date of birth, for example. It has to have an address. It has to have a picture on it. So a university card is not going to pass as an ID card. So it has to be a national card or a passport. So just make sure you check if there's any extra documents that they ask for, and the documents that you have pass the minimum requirements. Nor usually you can bring either. They will accept either, because not everyone has a passport. So they will usually accept a passport or ID. Plan your itinerary. And wait, I want to emphasize the reason they do this, which is because one of the most obvious ways that you have cheaters on any standardized test is you have a fake person pretend to be you. So you call up your cousin or your friend who has perfect English, and maybe it's someone who does this as work, as a job, and they sort of like change their hair and dress a certain way. I don't know. They pretend to be you with your ID card. So the checking of the ID card is actually very serious for a standardized test. They really need to make sure that the person whose name is attached to the results is actually the human in front of them who's taking the test. I haven't heard of any big scandals around this in Algeria, but I can promise you that in China, for example, or in East Asia, there have been a lot of scandals about agencies that just run fake test takers and make a lot of money off of this. Okay, next, what do you need to do for day of? Just make sure you know how to get where you're going and you're not late. Just remember, don't get so lost in your test prep that you don't actually know where to park, or what time the center opens. Just figure out these details. Don't let these be the things that trip you up. I wanted to mention that there are some considerations for individuals who have a recognized medical disability or health need. Some testing centers will provide accommodations. So when you finish your registration and you select, well, of course, when you start the registration, you select the testing center. But once you have confirmed your registration, make sure to see if there's any accommodations that can help you if you are someone with a disability or a health-related need. So what can I bring into the classroom? You can bring, and I said often because every testing center has the right to slightly alter this, but usually you can bring water, snacks, and glasses. That's in terms of physical items. So what can you not bring? Your phone. All right. In front of you in the testing center, you will have laptop, scrap paper, and pencils. And I'm very curious about this change about the at-home edition, no longer doing paper and pencils, but the in-person centers are definitely still using paper and pencils, probably because you have a person in front of you who's watching everyone take the test. Thank you, Nora. No electronic watches. Yes, nothing on your person that is electronic, and they have the right to ask you to remove things similar as the at-home test said, like no hats or no like sunglasses on your head. Like you really need to be devoid of anything other than water, snacks, and reading glasses. How does the scoring work? So this is the overall scoring rubric, and we looked at it a little bit earlier in the, I guess actually in the very first session, but every section is scored out of 30 points. And the definition of like, is a 22 in listening high versus a 22 in speaking, which is only fair. Okay, I would ignore this. I don't think that is super relevant, the actual breakdown of each section. I recommend you focus on familiarizing yourself with how to increase your score in terms of what competencies to show rather than getting lost in the numbers. But I wanted to show you that this is why the TOEFL exam is out of a total score of 120. You will get 4 scores. You will get a score for every section, and you will get 1 total score at the end. So this is when I said I'd show a screenshot of what your score will look like when it comes to you. This is what it will look like, except you have to ignore the giant watermark that says sample across it. You won't have this gray writing over it, but otherwise this is how you will receive your results. So you'll get a total score indicator. The total score here is 83, and it is simply addition. It is adding the scores of the 4 sections. So you can see the 4 sections each have their own score, and these are in the order of the test. So reading is first in the test, listening is second, then speaking, then writing. So overall, you can see, and this is the same example I used in the first class. If you're saying this looks familiar, that's because it is. You can see this person is struggling most on writing, and then everything else is moderate to fine. Oh, sorry, and that first sentence there, which is that most universities and schools or companies will want a score of 100 or more. There are more and more places now that are accepting lower scores, but they will still want you to take the test just so that they can see that you're an intermediate language user and maybe not advanced language user. So when people say, what is a good TOEFL score? I like to say in general, usually universities want above 100, but visas and jobs may take above 85. All right, because if you go back to our big rubric, you can see that in reading, to enter into the high level, you need a 22. In listening, also the same thing, you need a 22. So if we add these together, we are at 44. In speaking, to get to the highest level, which is good, now we need a 26. So if you're going to follow, just do my math with me, that gets us to 70. In writing, to get to that top section of good, the minimum you need is a 24. So that means our total score would be 94. So when you have reached 94, it's not required that this is the math that gets you there, right? You might have a 30 in reading and a 15 in writing and come out with the same score at the end. But what I'm trying to show you is that generally, if you are in or above the 90s, you should be fine for what you need. Again, if we're talking university and we're talking a competitive university, that might not hold up. But as far as most requirements that you're looking for, you're going to be okay with 85 to 90. No, nor there's no academic and general version of the TOEFL. There's only one version. Everyone is taking the same test. That's why it's a little bit funny that a lot of the, not funny, but it's something to note, which is that a lot of the examples in the TOEFL are from academia. They're university lectures, they're campus conversations, but this test is the same one that you would take if you were taking it for a job. All right, so what are the main differences between the TOEFL and the IELTS exams? So this is the big question that I always get, because these exams are essentially, they serve the same purpose. The university will say, we want a TOEFL or an IELTS result. The job, the company will say, take one of these. It will be rare that you'll find someone that will say, we don't take TOEFL, we only take IELTS. I have never seen that before. So you're not going to be choosing between them based on what your employer or what your university requests. Usually the choice is up to you. And here are some things to consider when you're choosing if you should take the TOEFL or the IELTS. This is our boxing ring. ETS TOEFL versus IELTS. And for those who aren't familiar, the IELTS test is offered by, it's a Cambridge test. It's part of the UK government sort of English programming. And you can take it at the British Council or also in MBI and CETIF. And it's the same thing. It's a standardized, internationally recognized test that it serves as proof of your level of English. So the main differences to consider when you're wondering to do TOEFL, if you're wondering if you should do TOEFL or IELTS, the big one that I hear from a lot of students is thinking about the speaking section. So when you are doing the speaking section of the IELTS, you are talking with a human. In Algeria, this is an actual examiner on site. In other countries, France probably among them, they do an option where you can do the test at home, but the speaking section is a video call. So it's a live conversation, either at a distance or in the same room with a human. Versus the TOEFL, where you are recording your spoken responses into a computer. There's no real human on site. You can't read someone's expression. You can't read someone's lips. You are listening to audio or you're reading things and you are speaking recorded responses. The next main difference to consider is about the overall test length. IELTS is 3 hours long, TOEFL is 2 hours long. So TOEFL is shorter. That could mean something to you. If you're like, absolutely no way can I do 3 hours of test taking. And this time does not include breaks. Okay, so the actual experience, really you end up setting aside your whole morning for one of these tests. So it's something to think about. TOEFL is a shorter test. Then I would say the next big consideration I hear about, if not the first consideration I hear about, is price. So exact pricing can vary depending on the different pricing, the different testing center. And I don't have an IELTS price for you in euro, pound, or dollar. I only have the dinar price to compare. But when you compare the current prices, IELTS is a lot cheaper. There's no way around that. It's almost 50%. It's half. I want to say it's almost half, but I can't remember if that's actually correct English. The IELTS is 34,000. The TOEFL is 63,000 dinar. So if you're looking at the investment and you're saying to yourself, I don't care which test I study for, I don't care about the speaking section being different, I don't care about test length, it's, for me, the big thing is price, then IELTS is going to win every time. It's substantially cheaper than the TOEFL. A next thing to consider, and this is something that will really make your experience dramatically different in the test, is actually about the types of questions. So TOEFL only has multiple choice questions. When you are doing the reading section or when you're doing the listening section, it's just pick the answer in the multiple choice. Then on the speaking and writing sections, you're producing language, free form. You're talking spontaneously or somewhat spontaneously, and you're writing, it's free form. But when you have questions, it's always multiple choice. IELTS has so many question types. It's a completely different experience. So yeah, they'll do some multiple choice. They'll do some matching, okay? Match column A with the synonym in column B, for example. They do a lot around graphics. So they'll do a map or a plan or a blueprint, a diagram, a table, a flow chart, and they'll ask you to actually interpret what you're looking at. So they'll show you kind of a graphical chart of, I don't know, maybe sales revenue from a small business. And they will ask you questions that also rely on your ability to do data analysis to a certain extent. It's not, statistical analysis that you're doing, but you don't see this at all in the TOEFL, this sort of working with labeling also within a graph. Sentence completion, where you're typing free form. When I say free form, I mean you're typing your own words in, whereas in the TOEFL, you're just selecting the bubble for multiple choice. That's the same for summary completion. Then we have short answer questions. Usually these are questions like, why did this happen? And you type an answer. And then they have true, false, not given, which someone told me in the first class, Algerians are very familiar with. Yes, no, not given. I forget the word we used in the first class. It wasn't not given, but it was something like, I don't know, true, false, or neither, something like that. So this is a big consideration that you should have, which is that the actual response that is requested of you for the IELTS versus the TOEFL is really, really different. Yes, Nor, not mentioned. Thank you, not mentioned. All right, so these are the 4 things that you should be thinking about when you're considering IELTS versus TOEFL. I'm just going to recap. The speaking section, if it's a human or not, the overall test length, the price, and the type of question. All right, every section, you could go into every single section and tell me, the nuance of the difference between the speaking section in TOEFL versus IELTS, the reading section in TOEFL versus IELTS, et cetera, et cetera. And if that is something that is interesting to you, go ahead. There are tons of YouTube videos that will go over the nuances of each section and why it should impact which test you pick. For me, from a very broad level of the whole test, these are the 4 big things that you should consider. Then I wanted to highlight for you what I said earlier, which is that essentially I really want to erase this idea that the tests are accepted at a different level, that you'll find universities that take one but not the other. If you find those, send them to me, because I have never found one that doesn't take both. So for both of them, the results are valid for 2 years. For both of them, all 4 skills are tested: reading, listening, speaking, writing. They're both accepted almost everywhere. I have to put almost because it is almost everywhere. It's not literally every single place takes them, but if you're going to an international accredited university, they're going to take both of these. The grading is completely different, but that just boils down to numbers. So in the TOEFL test, you're going to have a high number for your result because of the way they do the grading. In the IELTS, you're going to have much smaller numbers, which will have decimals, 7.5, 6.5, okay? So Mahdi is saying you could say the 2 are similar to each other. Well, the tests themselves have some key differences, like the question types. The people who've designed them have designed them very differently. But the actual, what's the word I'm looking for? What you can do with these tests is the same. You can use both of them to open doors to universities. You can use both of them to open doors to jobs abroad or in Algeria. There's no difference in the acceptance rate of the test. The tests themselves are different. You're going to have pie charts in IELTS. You didn't see any pie charts with me in TOEFL, okay? So there are some key differences in how the test is done. I see Munir saying, why is it only valid for 2 years? Well, when people are measuring something like language skills can increase, but they can also be lost. So if you tested in 1995, if you were alive then, if you tested in 1995 that you were fluent in Japanese, and then next year it's 2025, and you show me your test results from 20 years ago, I'm going to say to you, there's no way for me to validate, sorry, 30 years ago, there's no way for me to validate that you have the same level of language now as you had then. I need a recent test. Okay, so this is what I This is why I say you need to be strategic when you take the test, because it will only be valid for 2 years and you will have to do a full retake and you will have to pay in full if you need to take it a second, third, fourth time. Okay. Time management, the key to success. I see Hisham asking questions about studying at the American Institute. I love the questions. I don't have time to go into all the examples right now, but you can call our front desk, you can email us. Everything is transparent. We can explain everything, how it works. Marhaba bik. All right, everybody, time management, the key to success in the TOEFL. How can I use my time efficiently during the test? So we have listening and reading. So we're going to start with what we call our receptive skills. The reason we're putting these together is because this is all about multiple choice questions. As we talked about with comparing to the IELTS, you only have multiple choice questions for listening and reading. All right, we'll start with listening. And again, I know I'm rushing a little bit straight into this because we have a lot of tips. This is time management tips broken down by section. So listening section, take notes. You're going to see that a time management tip for basically all of the sections is to take notes. Yes, it helps you remember what was said, but it also saves you time when you're trying to track your brain. So it serves multiple purposes, but one of the main purposes of note-taking is it's a shortcut into accessing the information that you need for the answer. Check your material before the start of the session if you're doing it online. I mean, this is something that is not really just time management. You have to do this if you are doing the IBT, the internet-based test, which everyone in Algeria is required to take the IBT. There's no paper-based test here. So this is something that if you're in a center in Sétif, Constantine, Waharan, they will guide you through a check on your headset. But if you are worried about it, insist on a second one. Check your volume. See if your computer allows you to increase the volume. Get very comfortable with your equipment before you're starting to rely on it. Spend time reading and understanding the questions and the options before answering. So this is in the listening excerpts where you have some written material, or when you have access to seeing the questions. Make sure that you are actually reading what is being asked clearly before you select. Actually, this is not just about when you can see the material before you listen. Even when you're seeing the material after you listen, don't move so quickly and be so stressed that you don't read the question carefully. That is the hardest part, is when you're stressed about time and you don't read the question properly and they get a gotcha question where they trick you, and simply because you were rushing, you didn't get the right answer. And then the last one is about what happens if you get stuck on a question. So really, we recommend skipping. Skip a question. If you're within one section, you can go back to questions that you skipped. Don't sit and waste time racking your brain on a question that you're unsure of until you've answered all the other ones. So answer as many as you can. If you are stuck on one, leave it, and then you return to it at the end. That is the more effective way to manage your time than forcing yourself to sit through and answer questions as you go. Now we're in reading. So read the questions before reading the text. This is a really smart thing to do with reading passages. Before you read the text, if you have access, which you saw in the reading passages, you will have access to the questions. Go ahead and read them either while you're reading the passage or even before you read the passage, because it will help you know what is the most relevant information to pick up. Take notes. Just what we said before, take notes is going to come up every time. Take notes while reading, and then also remember what we talked about writing words and writing abbreviations as a way to save time. Don't waste your time writing a full sentence. Just make sure you write the main ideas to help you answer the questions correctly. Skim the text quickly first before going back to details. So this goes back to our conversation on skimming and scanning. So these are both synonyms for when you read text very quickly, just to pick up the main idea. So this is something that you can use strategically during the exam. You skim quickly to make sure you have the idea, which means you don't wait and pause and wonder if you don't know a vocabulary word. I wonder what this one means. No, you skim and you take the main idea. And if you don't understand something, you leave it aside. Then on the second reading, and when you're faced with the questions in front of you, you start to look for more detail. And then when you're looking for details, remember this. Okay, so I'll read this and then I'll explain it. When looking for details, do not waste time trying to find the same words as the question. Focus on meaning. Essentially, remember that the test will try to trick you. And so they will use synonyms or they will paraphrase. They're not going to use every time the exact vocabulary from the reading passage in the question. This is how we test comprehension. I need to know if you understood me. If I just put the same vocab as is in the reading section, there's no obvious understanding. You're just matching the word. So don't focus on the actual words put in the question. Focus on the meaning of the question and what you've understood from the written passage. Now we'll go on to time management tips for speaking and writing. These are what we call productive skills because it is about producing language. We'll start with speaking. So with speaking, it is the shortest section. It's only 16 minutes long. I think in general, when we produce language, we tend to be much more nervous than when we receive it, right? Listening is a lot less scary than speaking. So there's already a sense of nerves, and the risk is that you will not take your time to fully understand the task or the prompt out of the nervousness about timing and about speaking into the recording. So this is just a reminder, of course, on all of the sections, you want to take your time, but it's even more important that you calm yourself down and stay evenly paced in the speaking section. You have, if you were here with me in the speaking section, you'll notice or you'll remember that you have 15 to 30 seconds of preparation time before you have to speak your answer. Use these, okay? Make sure that you are effectively using the time, you're reviewing your notes, you're starting to practice. And by use these seconds, I'm not suggesting you start memorizing an answer because as we talked about, we really don't want any memorized answers, but simply to take notes, organize your thoughts, and not just sort of stare blankly at the wall. Oh, it's time to speak. Okay, take advantage of the prep time. Start speaking as soon as the recording starts and stop speaking right before it ends. So you'll have a time bar so you can see when it's about to cut off. You want to make sure that your voice doesn't get cut. So you want to fill the whole recording. We talked about we don't want any blank space. So once it goes, you begin, but try to finish slightly before it concludes to show that you had the ability to comprehensively close your argument, okay? Because that's also a skill that you're able to, when you see, oh, there's only a few seconds left, you can say something like, thank you for your time, which maybe doesn't make sense in the TOEFL, but my point is you can wrap up your thoughts quickly in a professional, accurate way. And then again, we talked about this already in the speaking section, which is about please don't just repeat yourself to fill time. It is going to reduce your score more than having blank space. So don't just say the same thing on repeat just to fill the time. You're not going to get extra points for filling the time. In fact, you will have less points if you filled the time by repeating. So preference number one is no silence with good, new, interesting ideas. Preference two is some silence, but only original ideas. Last preference, which is not preferred, is no silence, but a lot of the same thing repeated. All right, now we're going to go over to writing. So pay close attention to the number of words. It shouldn't say required, it should say recommended. Because as we saw in the writing section, there's no minimum and maximum, but there are recommendations. So in the first written task, there's a recommendation for 175 words to 225 words. That's a recommendation made by the experts. So let's not disregard that. That is helpful. That makes sure that you don't think you have to write for, pages and pages and pages, that you can just do 3 paragraphs, 4, maybe 5 paragraphs maximum and be done. The second written task, they say they have a strongly recommended minimum. It should not be less than 100 words. So pay attention to those recommendations. And if you veer off of them, if you don't follow them, make sure it's with a good reason why. They really needed more time. I really needed more space to get my ideas across. Spend time writing a draft and checking spelling errors. So this one you can take in two ways. Number one could be during the test on your notes, you could start to write out some words that you're unsure about, just so you see them visually before you type them into the computer. It's also, I would say writing a draft is also about organizing. It's not just about spelling mistakes. So organize, what's my first idea? What's my second idea? And really use the paper in front of you as much as you need so that you can actually, I'm a very visual person. So when I can visualize my essay, I'm going to have a much easier time writing it on the computer. Oh, this is about speaking. So this is my lovely PowerPoint is not cooperating with me tonight. So ignore this last one. And I don't even remember what the third one was supposed to be on writing. So we'll ignore the third one. We'll go to the fourth here, which is leave some time at the end for one last check. Please do this with writing that second check. You don't want to even just leave 1 minute. I would recommend leaving. So let's say the first task, you have 20 minutes. I would recommend leaving the last 4 minutes, 5 minutes even to review what you wrote, clean it up, fix any awkward phrasing, add vocab words, check spelling. You don't want to spend your 20 minutes just writing, and you never get to read it again. For me, I would say my first time when I write and then I review just the first time, I probably change about 30% of what I wrote. So you want to give yourself a really good amount of time to review your writing, within limits, because this is a very short section as well. The second one, you have 10 minutes to write. I would leave 2 minutes at the end to review the writing where you can still feel comfortable enough to make some quick changes. All right, we're coming a little bit to the end. I don't think we're going to have time to go through all the preparation slides, but we can talk about it. But let me actually, before we dive in, let me see some questions are coming in here. Munir, American Institute has Instagram and Facebook. You can look us up. I personally do not. Umema says, is it possible to find test examples on the internet? Yes, it is. So we've been using example questions every night this week in our series. So you're welcome to watch the recordings when they go up on YouTube to find those. But I'll tell you a secret, which is that I'm largely using the practice materials straight from the ETS website. So let me even just share the URL of the ETS website. I mean, I'm right now in the registration page, but honestly, it's very straightforward to find the practice questions. Now, is it a full practice test? No, it's practice sets that are divided into a reading practice, a listening, a writing, a speaking practice, but it's visually what you're looking at is exactly how the questions will look on the day of. So what I'm putting in the chat right now is the URL for the overall ETS page. It's not directly to the practice section, but you should be able to easily find it from there. Okay, Nora says, how do we make sure we're making eye contact and our facial expressions are pleasant with the computer? I would not worry about it, Nora. You are going to be assessed on what they are hearing. Okay, they are still asking you to have a microphone. They want to make sure that you are clear, that your intonation is good, that you answer the question accurately. I would focus last on sort of overall perception, even though I know, especially if you've studied psychology, you might say like, well, I think I'll get a higher score if they think I'm nice, or if I seem personable, or they'll understand me better based on my expressions. Okay, it's sure, maybe it's possible, but I wouldn't focus on it. Hanyi says, can you re-show us the tips quickly? Yes, I can do that before we move on. So here are, and these, remember, these are time management tips. Here's listening. If you want to screenshot listening, here are your time management tips for the listening section. Then we have reading. Here are your time management tips for the reading section. Then we have speaking, time management for the speaking section, for screenshots, because I'm still moving quickly. And here are your time management tips for the writing section. But of course, you have to ignore the bottom left because that is from the speaking section. So for writing, you're just going to get the 3 tips. And yes, this whole recording is going to be on YouTube with me noticing the mistakes in my slides and going between different, toggling between the presentation and the computer. We get a real live experience in our YouTube. Great. All right, let's move on then in our last 10 minutes. So I'm actually going to save this for the end because I'm not sure we're going to get to all of these. But we're going to start backwards. So initially I was going to say, how do you prepare for each section? But actually I want to start here with how do I prepare myself overall to handle the stress of these standardized tests? So keeping a positive mindset, not only when you're in the test, but also when you're in your study and preparation phase is going to be extremely helpful to making this not a super miserable experience for you and keeping you calm and relaxed the day of the test. And if you are calm and relaxed, you are going to have a higher score. So how do we keep a positive mindset? What are some recommendations I have for you? Number 1, focus on your goal. If you have a main goal, which I hope you do for this exam, if there's one thing I've emphasized, the horse that I have been beating dead, is that you should have a reason to take this exam because it's expensive and the scores are only 2 years long. But focus on that goal. So you're not just taking the test to take the test and to be a miserable, sad person who has to take tests. You're taking the test because it's building a bridge for you to your future goals. And that is really going to help on mindset on those harder days. Keeping a motivated mindset through the section. So this is where practice testing is really going to help you, is practicing the length of a 2-hour exam, understanding what it feels like to go from reading to listening to speaking to writing. So if you've practiced that transition, you're going to be better equipped on the actual test day to maintain your energy throughout the long test so that you don't give all your energy in the reading section. And then by the time you get to speaking and writing, you're just like, this is me dead on the floor or completely exhausted. And next is to not lose spirit when messing up a section. So if you feel like you really bombed like the speaking section, you still have to finish the test. You still have to go into the next section and do your final written excerpts. And so finding a way to remember that messing one thing up does not mean your whole score will be terrible, and to keep yourself pushing until the end is going to be very helpful. And then we're going to talk about staying calm and focused. So if this is, of course, if you're in a testing center with other folks. So don't try to imitate other test takers. Ignore everyone who's around you. If you see someone sort of counting things on their fingers and you say to yourself, like, I'm not counting anything. Did I misunderstand the question? And just something that they're doing makes you doubt yourself, or you suddenly think, oh, this person seems really confident, so I'm going to start to follow what they're doing or kind of observe. This is a distraction. It's not going to serve you. You're never going to know if the person next to you is answering the same questions you're answering in front of you. So just put on the blinders and focus only on your own page. During breaks, if you run into other folks, don't ask them about their answers just because you're still in the middle of a test. You don't want the proctors thinking that you're talking about the test in the middle. I don't know if they'll explicitly disqualify you, but they certainly won't allow it. And more than that, again, I come back to the word distraction. You need to be focused on yourself and yourself only. And then taking notes and using them while answering. This is just going to calm you down in general if you make sure that you take full advantage of the resources at your disposal. All right, let's see if we have other questions on this. Yep, it's going to be on YouTube. Salah is asking, how much time do we need to prepare for TOEFL? I thought to dedicate a month for each skill and another 2 weeks to wrap up everything. So 4.5 months to 5 months. So Salah, it kind of depends, because I recommend a minimum of 2.5, 3 months. However, if you have a specific score that you want to get, it's a really good idea to take a practice test online and see how far you are from that score. So if you really want a 110, You take an online practice test, which are not perfect in terms of scoring, but you can still get a general idea, and you find yourself landing at 101. Then yeah, certainly 3 months, 4 months should be totally fine. But if you say to yourself, I want a 110, and on my practice test, I'm on 85, then you're going to need to put substantially more time into your preparation, because you're also going to be working on improving your English. As I always try to contrast, when you're studying for a test, an English test, yes, there's a part of you that is just studying English, working on building your vocabulary, on using consistent grammar structures, on pronunciation, for example. But there's a whole other piece of it, which is about familiarizing yourself with the test itself. And both of these need to happen. So if you're trying to work on your English overall, then I would recommend at least 6 months. And then you can start familiarizing yourself with the test. But if you're generally within the range and you just want to hone your score and raise it by maybe 10 points, then 2 to 3 months should be fine, just to get really familiar with the test structure. Okay, Zenab is saying, isn't this a one-to-one test? No, you are in a testing room with other people. You have a barrier of some kind. It's not a full barrier, but it's like a wall of sorts that if you lean back, you can see other people taking the test. You're not in a room alone. You will hear their voices. You will hear their chairs scraping. If someone like breaks their pencil, you might hear it. You are in a space with a proctor who's there to make sure that no one is cheating, no one is talking, but you're not alone in the test. Sama, in your opinion, what's the hardest, the IBT or the face-to-face? So actually in TOEFL, you're only doing IBT. Algeria has no option for paper test. The only difference in Algeria is, are you going to take the IBT at home, or are you going to go to a center which gives you a laptop? You can't see me, but I'm shaking my laptop. They give you a laptop or a desktop, and you still take the internet-based test. You're just physically in a language center. That's the difference. So the paper-based test does still exist for TOEFL, but you're not doing it in Algeria. It's not available. Okay, so wherever you are in Algeria, you're taking the internet-based test. All right, let's see what else we have. So Nora is asking, can you talk to the invigilator, which is the British word for what I call proctor, the person who is supervising the test, about technical issues? Definitely. If you have a technical issue, you should signal it immediately. I will tell you that in a lot of cases, a technical issue, if it's very serious, they may stop and tell you that you have to come back and take the test on another day. They're crazy about any kind of interruption. So make sure that if you have a technical issue, or sometimes I guess these things do spontaneously happen, but really the tech test that you do at the beginning is the most important part to making sure the test runs smoothly. So you really want to test all of your devices. The TOEFL test itself will lead you through a tech prep. Wow, test prep, tech prep. So the test itself in the beginning will have you make sure you can hear and make sure you can speak, so that you're familiarized with the content, with the equipment first. Great. All right. And then my last sort of overall and general pieces of advice is do a maximum of prep test online. As much as possible, do preparation. There are so many websites that can help you. Get some sleep. All right, this is something that is scientifically proven by the experts, that if you have a good night of sleep, not just the night before the test, but 2 nights before the test, you will come refreshed, thinking more clearly, and you'll be able to have a stronger result on the exam. Okay? During the exam, you can only eat during breaks. You can only eat during breaks. All right, everyone, if you have any other questions, send them to me. We didn't get to my other slides, which are about sort of tips for each section. We're running out of time, but I'm going to have a big wrap-up email sent to everyone who came to any of these classes with all these slides attached. Okay, so you will have a chance to review everything that was in the slides, to send us your comments, send your feedback, everything. And I wish you all the best of luck. It has really been a pleasure working with you for the last 6 days. I hope you do amazing on the TOEFL. I hope you come to the Institute and say hello to us. And I hope you also join me. We'll be doing our next free webinar soon. The topic is to be confirmed, but I believe we'll be talking about business English or English soft skills, something in that domain. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm really, really happy to have had you with me today, and I wish you all a great rest of your evening. And come visit and introduce yourself to me, letting me know that, hey, I was in your class, and I probably will remember the names. Thank you, everyone. Best of luck and have a good night.